December 1941. A young American pilot grips the controls of his fighter as dozens of Japanese aircraft appear over the Pacific. At first glance, they don't look particularly threatening. They seem small, light, and almost fragile. Then, the shooting starts. Within minutes, American pilots are watching something they can barely believe. The Japanese fighters are turning inside them, climbing faster, appearing out of nowhere, disappearing just as quickly. Pilots who thought they were flying some of the world's best aircraft suddenly find themselves struggling to survive. Rumors spread rapidly across the Pacific. The Japanese have built a super fighter. Some claimed it could outclimb anything. Others said it could turn out anything. A few even believed it was nearly invincible. For months, American pilots entered combat against a fighter they barely understood. A fighter that seemed capable of doing things no enemy aircraft should be able to do. Its name was the Mitsubishi Zero. And the ugly truth is that America's opinion of the Zero changed dramatically during the war. First came fear, then respect, then something completely unexpected. Because the fighter that once terrified American pilots eventually became a symbol of everything Japan got wrong about aerial warfare. This is the ugly truth about what America really thought of the Mitsubishi Zero. When the United States entered World War II, very few Americans understood just how advanced Japanese aviation had become. Many military planners underestimated Japan. Some viewed Japanese aircraft as inferior copies of Western designs. That assumption would prove costly. When the Mitsubishi A6M0 entered combat, it immediately shocked Allied pilots. Introduced in 1940, the aircraft represented a revolutionary achievement. It possessed extraordinary range, excellent climb performance, and maneuverability unlike almost anything flying at the time. During the opening months of the Pacific War, American and Allied pilots encountered an enemy fighter that seemed capable of dominating the skies. Reports from combat units painted a disturbing picture. Pilots described the Zero as incredibly agile. Attempts to engage it in traditional dogfights often ended badly. Aircraft such as the P-40 Warhawk and F-2A Buffalo struggled against it. In the Philippines, Malaya, the Dutch East Indies, and across the Pacific, Allied forces suffered heavy losses. The Zero developed an almost mythical reputation. Some pilots believed it could perform impossible maneuvers. Others thought it possessed superior speed. Stories spread quickly. Many weren't entirely accurate, but they reflected a simple reality. The Zero had gained control of the psychological battlefield, and that was almost as valuable as its victories in the air. American pilots weren't imagining things. The Zero truly was exceptional. But its advantages came from a design philosophy very different from American aircraft. Japanese engineers prioritized maneuverability above almost everything else. Weight was reduced wherever possible. Armor protection was largely eliminated. Self-sealing fuel tanks were omitted. The result was a remarkably light fighter. This gave the Zero extraordinary agility. At lower speeds, few aircraft could match it. A pilot attempting to turn with a Zero often found himself losing the fight. And during the early stages of the war, many Allied pilots made exactly that mistake. The Zero wasn't winning because American pilots lacked courage. It was winning because they were fighting the wrong battle. The Japanese fighter excelled in close-range turning engagements. Unfortunately for the Allies, that's exactly the kind of combat many pilots instinctively entered. The result was devastating. By 1942, the Zero had become something of a legend. American pilots respected it. Some feared it. Stories from surviving aviators spread through ready rooms across the Pacific. New pilots heard warnings before entering combat. Never turn with a Zero. Never underestimate a Zero. Never assume you've escaped a Zero. The fighter developed a reputation far larger than its actual capabilities. Psychology matters in warfare. When a weapon gains a reputation for invincibility, it can influence decision-making long before combat begins. The Zero had reached that point, but while American pilots feared the aircraft, American intelligence was working to understand it. And eventually, they would discover something important. The Zero wasn't invincible, not even close. One of the most important intelligence victories of the Pacific War occurred in June 1942. A Japanese Zero crashed on Akutan Island in Alaska. Unlike most downed aircraft, this one remained largely intact. American forces recovered it. What followed changed the air war. For the first time, engineers and test pilots could thoroughly examine a Zero. They measured it, studied it, flew it, and discovered the truth. The fighter's strengths were real, but so were its weaknesses. The aircraft rolled poorly at high speeds. Its controls became heavier during fast maneuvers. It lacked armor protection, and perhaps most importantly, it was extremely vulnerable to gunfire. The very design choices that made the Zero deadly also made it fragile. Suddenly, America's understanding of the aircraft changed. The mystery was gone. Now, it was simply another machine. And machines can be defeated. This is one of the biggest reasons Zero's story becomes tragic. America wasn't just producing better aircraft. America was producing pilots, lots of them. Meanwhile, Japan was losing experienced aviators faster than it could replace them. Even the best aircraft become ineffective without experienced pilots. American veterans increasingly realized the real threat wasn't the airplane. The real threat was the pilot inside it. This adds tremendous historical depth. By 1944, the situation had completely reversed. The fighter that once terrified American pilots was now facing Hellcats, Corsairs, veteran American squadrons, better radar, better tactics. During the Battle of the Philippine Sea, hundreds of Japanese aircraft were destroyed. American pilots witnessed the complete collapse of Japanese naval aviation. This is where America's perception of the Zero changed forever. The ugly truth wasn't that America feared the Zero. The ugly truth was that the Zero forced America to confront a reality it hadn't expected. Japan was capable of producing one of the finest fighters in the world. For a brief moment in history, it dominated the Pacific skies. But war is unforgiving. The same design choices that made the Zero brilliant in 1941 made it vulnerable by 1944. And as America's factories, pilots, and technology grew stronger, the fighter that once seemed unbeatable slowly became a relic of a changing war. Yet even decades later, American veterans still speak about the Zero with respect. Not because it was perfect, but because it was good enough to force an entire nation to adapt. And that may be the greatest compliment any enemy aircraft can receive. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Would you rather fly the Mitsubishi Zero or the F-6F Hellcat in 1944? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Once pilots understood the Zero's weaknesses, combat began changing. American aviators stopped trying to outturn Japanese fighters. Instead, they exploited speed, altitude, and firepower. The famous Thatch Weave became one of several tactics developed to counter the Zero. American pilots learned to attack from above, use diving speed, avoid prolonged turning battles, and disengage when necessary. These tactics transformed encounters with Japanese fighters. The Zero hadn't become weaker. American pilots had become smarter. For the first time, the Zero was facing opponents who understood exactly how to fight it. The results were dramatic. Then came another problem for the Zero. American technology continued advancing. New fighters entered service. The F-6F Hellcat, the F-4U Corsair, improved versions of existing aircraft. These fighters were faster, more heavily armed, better protected, and increasingly capable of exploiting the Zero's vulnerabilities. The Hellcat, in particular, became one of the Zero's most dangerous opponents. American pilots respected the Japanese fighter, but they no longer feared it. Many now view it as outdated. A fighter designed for a war that was already changing. The balance of power in the Pacific skies began shifting dramatically, and Japan struggled to keep pace. This is where America's opinion of the Zero became complicated. Early in the war, Americans viewed it as an extraordinary aircraft, because it was. But later, many viewed it as a symbol of Japan's strategic mistakes. Japanese designers had sacrificed protection for performance. That decision worked brilliantly in 1941. It worked far less effectively in 1944. As American aircraft improved, the Zero's weaknesses became impossible to ignore. Pilots who survived hits that would destroy a Zero often returned to fight another day. Japanese pilots frequently did not have that luxury. The Zero represented a philosophy that prioritized winning today's dogfight. America increasingly prioritized surviving tomorrow's. Over time, that difference became enormous. Interestingly, American veterans rarely dismissed the Zero. Even after learning how to defeat it, many continued speaking about it with respect, because they understood how dangerous it had been. Pilots who fought the Zero knew it could still kill anyone who underestimated it. Veterans often emphasized the same lesson. The Zero was never a bad aircraft. It was simply designed for a different stage of the war. In the hands of a skilled pilot, it remained a serious threat. And many American pilots never forgot that. Respect survived long after fear disappeared. One of the most fascinating parts of this story is that before Pearl Harbor, many Americans underestimated Japanese aviation. American military planners knew Japan was developing modern aircraft, but few believed Japan could produce a world-class fighter that rivaled the best aircraft in the world. Some intelligence reports even suggested Japanese pilots lacked the training and technical skill of Western air forces. That assumption proved disastrous. When the Zero appeared over China and later throughout the Pacific, it shattered those beliefs almost overnight. American pilots weren't simply surprised by the aircraft, they were surprised that Japan had built it. This created an uncomfortable realization. The United States had badly underestimated its opponent, and wars become dangerous when you underestimate the enemy. One reason the Zero gained such a fearsome reputation was because surviving pilots kept telling stories about it. Imagine returning from combat. Half your squadron is gone, you barely escaped, and you're trying to explain what happened. Many pilots genuinely believed the Zero could do things no aircraft should be capable of. The stories became larger with each retelling. The aircraft gained an aura of invincibility, not because it was invincible, because the men fighting it were struggling to understand what they had witnessed. This psychological effect became one of the Zero's most powerful weapons. Fear spreads faster than facts.